Exposing the illusion, how fake labor movements harm injured workers. Introduction. In recent years, a troubling trend has emerged in the realm of worker advocacy, the rise of so-called fake labor movements. These groups and individuals present themselves as champions of the working class, employing the language and imagery of genuine labor activism. Yet beneath the surface, they often work in lockstep with political and corporate interests that prioritize profits and power over people's well-being. For injured workers already struggling to secure fair compensation and timely medical care, this deception compounds their plight, blocking pathways to reform and silencing the voices most in need of a platform. Investigations by ProPublica and NPR have documented how workers' compensation has been systematically eroded, leaving injured workers vulnerable and often without the support they deserve. 2. What are fake labor movements? Fake labor movements are not just a vague concept. They often manifest through specific individuals and groups who adopt the language of working-class solidarity while tiptoeing around meaningful reforms. For example, certain political figures and advocacy networks aligned with liberal progressive Democrats, the Green Party, or self-proclaimed socialist leaders have portrayed themselves as champions of the underdog. They include high-profile names like Senator Bernie Sanders and Seattle's Socialist City Council member Kshama Sawant, who, despite their fiery speeches, have not actively pushed for robust, enforceable federal standards to protect injured workers. At the state level, politicians like Washington State Representative Mary Foss and her predecessor, Mike Sells, as well as would-be progressive challengers such as Jason Call for Congress, have not visibly advanced the cause of a National Workers' Compensation Commission or intervened to stop the fragmentation of state systems. Instead, these politicians and their allied groups have remained silent as workers navigate a patchwork of benefits that vary drastically from one state to another. 3. Political and corporate connections. To understand why these fake labor movements fail to act, we must follow the money and influence trails. Many so-called pro-labor representatives receive backing, either financial or via strategic endorsements, from unions reluctant to challenge the status quo or from political action committees tied to corporate interests. Instead of pushing for reforms that would ensure injured workers' rights are protected nationwide, they settle for incremental tweaks that benefit employers and insurers more than the injured. The Congressional Research Service highlights the variability in state-run systems, noting the absence of federal standards. Meanwhile, groups claiming to be progressive often fail to fight for immigrant workers, who face unique vulnerabilities, including threats of retaliation and deportation. According to the National Employment Law Project, undocumented and immigrant workers are frequently targeted when they file legitimate compensation claims, an issue that politicians and organizations posing as labor's allies rarely address directly. 4. Real-world example. Take the case of Snohomish County in Washington State, where local advocates have spent years pushing for federal-level reforms to help injured workers. Throughout this period, State Representative Mary Foss, touted as a friend of labor, rose in political prominence. Yet her influence has not been leveraged to call for uniform national standards or to challenge business-friendly policies that erode workers' comp protections. Progressive and labor-affiliated groups in the region celebrate nominal achievements while neglecting systemic issues that continue to harm injured workers. Although they claim to support everyday working Americans, their legacy amounts to fragmented efforts rather than a united front demanding a baseline of justice for all who are injured on the job. The impact on injured workers. The consequences of these hollow claims and silent alliances are severe. Injured workers face not only the physical and financial toll of workplace accidents, but also a legal and bureaucratic landscape tilted against them. Reports by ProPublica NPR detail how employees often receive slashed benefits, are forced into endless appeals, or struggle for years to secure basic medical coverage. Without unified federal standards, each state sets its own rules, often under industry influence, resulting in a patchwork system that leaves countless injured workers behind. 6. Identifying and challenging fake labor movements. Recognizing fake labor movements requires skepticism and research. Follow the money. Check open secrets for campaign contributions to see if corporate interests fund these so-called advocates. Check their records, review the legislative history and public statements of the politicians mentioned at congress.gov or state legislature websites. Compare their rhetoric to their action or inaction on workers' rights. Demand transparency, press unions, labor-linked nonprofits, and progressive leaders on why national workers' compensation reforms have stalled. Support authentic advocates, align with groups and individuals actively pushing for federal reforms and a national workers' compensation commission. Look for grassroots efforts documented by independent reporters, researchers, and worker centers dedicated to genuine justice and accountability. 7. Conclusion: the facade of a pro-labor stance crumbles when stacked against the lived reality of injured workers. By naming names and exposing groups, we shine a light on the political and organizational interests that have blocked essential reforms for too long. Moving forward, public scrutiny, relentless advocacy, and a willingness to hold all leaders accountable, no matter their partisan or ideological label, are critical in forging a system that ensures every injured worker in America receives just compensation and respectful treatment. It's time to call out the silence, reject the empty promises, and insist on genuine, accountable labor advocacy that puts workers first. Bible verse: Proverbs 31 verses 8-9 Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly, defend the rights of the poor and needy. Famous American founder quote Thomas Paine: "The world is my country, all mankind are my brethren, and to do good is my religion."